I'm genuinely in awe of Japanese tea, the health benefits, the deep umami, the taste. And what fascinates me most is this. It comes from the exact same tea plant as from China. Japan imported tea from China, imported its tea culture from China, and for centuries Japan has been trying to catch up with China. And yet, Japanese tea today tastes completely different. Now, why is this? My personal view is that there were 5 key innovations that happened in Japan that completely changed the trajectory of Japanese tea. And these innovations didn't happen anywhere else in the world. In this video, I'll talk about those 5 technological innovations. And the 5th one is actually not really a technological innovation, but it's really important nonetheless. Hi, I'm Yuki, I'm the founder of Tealife. Here we break down Japanese tea to make you a Japanese tea expert. The first technological breakthrough that shaped modern Japanese green tea was called the Aosei Seiho. This was back in 1738 by a man called Nagatani Sōen. This was in Uji of Japan. I'd like to call this the rolling revolution. The name itself is interesting. Aosei Seiho, the Ao literally means blue in Japanese. However, as you know, green tea really isn't blue, it's green. So why is it called Ao? Now, in classical Japanese, Ao has a different meaning. It refers to the green freshness of young plants. It's basically the color of living leaves. So Aosei Seiho, this literally translates to something like the green preserving method of making Sencha. And that's exactly what it does. Before this refinement, the Japanese green tea leaves already went through a steaming process. However, they were not rolled. And because of that, they did not have the freshness of the green tea leaves that we have right now. They said that back then the green tea leaves were more brown rather than green. What Nagatani Sōen introduced was he combined the steaming process with a deliberate multiple rolling process and a controlled drying process. And by doing multiple rounds of rolling and drying, he was able to lock in the freshness of the green tea and keep it green. When the leaves are rolled, the cells of the walls break and then the moisture redistributes. And then the leaves become a little bit more of a denser defined shape and it really locks in the flavor. The farmers would take the tea leaves, they would steam it, and then they would roll on a heated table. And this required skill. So the quality was very much dependent on the skill of the producer himself. However, because the results of this Aosei Seiho was so superior, this technology really spread fast across Japan. Over time, this rolling method became the dominant method of creating Sencha all across Japan. And what's significant is it still is in a sense because yes, it has gone through mechanizations and industrialization, especially in the Meiji period. However, the foundation of this technology still goes all the way back to this Aosei Seiho's manual process. So it's really still the foundation of Japanese green tea. The second technological breakthrough in Japanese tea is the Ooishita Saibai, which is systemic shading. And you might immediately think, oh, that must be matcha, which is correct. That's exactly what we're talking about. So this is also one of the very unique Japanese ideas introduced into tea. And chronologically, this actually comes before the Aosei Seiho for Sencha that we just talked about. In Uji, by the 16th century, the tea fields started to get covered in reed screens and straw. Now, there's no one person or timing that's attributed to this invention. It's said that this came more as an accident. As you probably know, the shading was done to reduce the astringency and bitterness of the tea while trying to increase the amount of umami and sweetness in the tea. And this became directly tied to the production of tencha, which is basically the raw materials or the raw leaves used in matcha. Now in 1835, the same covered cultivation process or idea was used to create Gyokuro. So interestingly, 1 century after the Aosei Seiho created the Sencha in the land of Uji, in the same place they took that process and they applied it to the shaded green tea leaves, and then that became Gyokuro. Covered cultivation became the pillar of quality Japanese green tea. And it's one of the reasons why Japanese green tea can express umami in a way that no other tea in any other country can. The third innovation we'll talk about today is the Takabayashi-shiki Automation. Now, by the late 19th century in Japan, Japanese tea production has really expanded. The Sencha has become dominant, and the shading methodology has really been established. What happened was Japan became open to international trade, and Japanese tea has become a major part of the export. Actually, only one of the few exports that really succeeded back then. So Japanese tea became an industry. Now the problem with this is back then, Japanese tea was still going through a very manual production process from the Aosei, Seicha, Seiho, so they were still hand rolling their tea. As Japan modernized in the Meiji period, obviously, this kind of became a bottleneck. So in Sayama, which is an area, it's also a tea production area north of Tokyo, a man of the name of Takabayashi-shiki, he was able to create a series of inventions and machinery that was able to mechanize the process of making Japanese green tea. A company in Shizuoka would take on the industrialization of this technology at scale, and this is still the mainstream concept of the machines that are being sold today. Now, in my view, this creation not only created increased output, I think it did a little bit more. I think what it did was it paved the way for Japan to really standardize. Now, this may sound like a normal course of events when it comes to evolution of technology, but remember that in China, they embraced the diversity and they embraced the smaller scale farms doing lots of different variations of tea. So this was another point in time when Japan clearly moved in a different direction by embracing standardization. Now the next technological innovation we'll talk about today is more specific to a certain type of tea, and this is the Hōjicha. Now Japan, they came up with this very unique green tea, steamed green tea called the Sencha, and what they did was they made it even more unique. They further roasted it, and that became the Hōjicha. Hōjicha is said to have emerged around 1920, so it's only been around for about a century, only 100 years old plus. So it's quite recent. The story goes that the tea merchants, they didn't want to waste anything, so they used the leftover bancha and leftover kukicha, so the stems of the tea leaves, to roast them and do something new with it. And that became the Hōjicha. So it's definitely not something that's a very high-end concept of a tea, and in many cases it still isn't. However, it was a way that really changed the way that you can drink or enjoy green tea. This is because roasting completely changes the green tea. It changes the green tea from an umami-based drink to more of an aroma-based drink. So by roasting, what happens is that the umami goes down, the sweetness goes down, but at the same time, the caffeine goes down, and the bitterness goes down, the astringency goes down. So it becomes enjoyable by people like the children, or like the elderly people, or people who are sensitive to caffeine. So it becomes a very different drink entirely. And look around now, if you think about it globally, probably Hōjicha is only second in terms of recognition of Japanese green tea internationally. Now, the final innovation we're talking about today is actually not a technological innovation. It's more philosophical, but it's something that makes it truly Japanese. It's the Wabi-cha. Now, wabi it's a loaded term, but it means something like appreciation for imperfection, restraint, simplicity. If we go back to the 15th and 16th century, Japanese tea was heavily influenced by China. So tea gatherings would be about imported chinawares. There are luxury utensils. It's about display and status. And this direction suddenly made a turn for almost the opposite. Through people like Murata Juko, Takenojo, Sen no Rikyu, they started to change what tea was about. It changed from extravagance to more restraint. So from large halls to smaller rooms, from Chinese ceramics to more domestic Japanese rustic bowls. It really changed the experience of tea ceremonies. It made imperfection beautiful. It made simplicity intentional and important. It made quiet meaningful. In that sense, it guided the trajectory of the Japanese tea culture. I actually also view it as the opposite as well, where I feel that the tea culture itself in a sense, to a certain extent, shaped the Japanese culture as a whole. So those were my 5 choices when it comes to what made Japanese green tea so different from other green tea. But there certainly could be others, so if you have any, let me know what you think. Thank you for watching. If you want to learn about Japanese green tea deeper than any other channel, please do subscribe and also register for a free newsletter from the link below.